Welcome to 3COUNTcommentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. Today we're going to be doing the Q&A for June 2022. Got a lot of questions, so let's get right into it. Synonymous TV. Question 1. Upon rewatching your Jey Uso turn heel video, do you still think the time is coming where Jey will turn on Roman, or will WWE drop it? Knowing WWE, they will likely drop it. I don't see a situation where they actually care enough about a storyline to go through with Jey Uso beating the hell out of Roman Reigns. I would definitely be surprised if that actually were to occur, personally. His second question: what is your current analysis of the Uso characters? Have they fully bought into the bloodline, or are they biding their time? I think it's pretty clear that the Usos are fully in on the bloodline. I like the idea when Jey was all in and Jimmy was kind of like 1 foot in, but it seemed like they changed the characters, so now that Jimmy is also in and the Usos are back to being on the same page. I still think that the better story is in the Usos eventually coming, maybe not to blows, but them having individual personalities and individual personas. It happened to every tag team at some point, where the individual starts to come out. And I'm pretty sure both of these guys don't want to be in this. I mean, I'm sure they love being tag team partners, but for Christ's sake, you don't have any individual ambitions? Like, Jey Uso had a nice run by himself. Who knows how far he could have gone? He could have been Intercontinental Champion or something like that. It sucks that it took for his brother to be injured for it to happen, but, I mean, eventually, we do have to see the end of the Usos, don't we? I mean, and it seems like once you've taken the Usos to their logical conclusion, they've already been the undisputed tag team champions. Like, there is nothing else for them to do. I'm not saying they have to fight each other. I'm saying at some point, maybe you do a brand split where you break them up or something, you know? Something has to happen. Something has to change. I mean, they've been a tag team for 12 years. That's a long time, especially in one company. All right. D-Mac. Wrestling's media-centric questions. It says, over time I have come to realize that so many well-known media personalities, including some journalists, have connections to people in the business. Do you think these connections should be disclosed whenever certain stories are talked about or not covered? It is one way to offset any conflicts of interest. Absolutely. I think that it's one of those things where you should have to, like, if you write a research paper, you know, you have to talk about where your funding comes from, you know? So I think definitely a wrestling news site should have to tell people where they get their funding. Do you get funding from Patreon or PayPal or whatever? Because that may dictate how you cover stories that involve Patreon and PayPal. You might actually be getting some type of backdoor money from OnlyFans, so it might explain why you might be promoting a female wrestler's OnlyFans account or something like that. If you worked with them personally on some type of previous project, you definitely should tell people that. Folks shouldn't have to go out and find these things and then call you out on it. You know, one story recently I thought was very interesting was the MJF goes home storyline that they were doing in the dirt sheets, because he had skipped that meet and greet. Dave Shearer of PW Insider in a Q&A basically admitted that, you know, the story, the idea was great for traffic to their website, which explains why there was so much talk about it, and explained the whole hysteria around it. It's because people were getting clicks. Everybody wanted to know what was going on. They were going to these sites, clicking everything possible to try to figure out what's going on with MJF, and it was great for PW Insider, and I'm sure other sites too. I would love for them to be able to admit something like that, and because it actually helps with not only keeping the journalists honest, but it also allows the people who are reading these stories to take things with a grain of salt. Like I said, I see too many wrestling media types that are doing at wrestling shows, trying to be their own media personality and stuff like that in the ring, and it's like, okay, at some point you have to come out and say, I've worked with these guys, I do shows with them, yada yada yada, so I'm not going to cover this. Maybe somebody else at the site will, or something, and then we can still say you might have some type of authority or, you know, responsibility to those people, and you might influence the story or something like that. We just want to know. And wrestling is a seedy business on both sides. It's seedy as hell when it comes to the outside the ring stuff, you know, as far as the media and backstage stuff, and it's, you know, seedy inside the ring too. So you just have to pay attention. It says, what media sources do you view as credible, if any? I personally like PW Insider. I think that they do stories that involve a lot of documentation. I think they do them very well. I think Dave Meltzer is a good historian. I think that he obviously in his columns and in his reviews are incredibly biased, but I have not seen any crap in like some of the history stuff that I've seen him write. You know, he's a pretty good historian, but I wouldn't trust any of his opinions or any of his reviews or columns or anything like that. I wouldn't trust it. But PW Insider, Post Wrestling seems to also be okay. So John Pollock and those guys. I would question the political slant of these organizations because they're all pretty progressive. I think the way they handled the Jake Atlas story, where it's pretty clear in public records who Jake Atlas attacked, you know, and then they would go out of their way to not mention it, and they would say, oh, we don't mention victims. It's like, but if you're talking about Jimmy Snuka, you're going to talk about Nancy Argentino, aren't you? You're not going to hide the name of Nancy Benoit in the story about Chris Benoit. So you're choosing, because you don't want to out a bisexual or gay wrestler, you don't want to out him. So instead of just saying that, and that we don't believe in outing people who are not publicly out, which to me is another question, because you would say if being gay is not a problem, then so what if the guy is gay? You know, so it's like, why are you like responsible for keeping his secrets? It's a public record, public information. Put it out there so people will know what's going on. If you're going to cover the story, and then you're like, well, it's possible for us to cover the story without telling that part. It's like, no. We should have all the information that you have. If we understand and find out for ourselves that you are hiding information, then public trust goes down. And then you go back to, because if you're hiding that for some political reason, then you could quite possibly be hiding something else. And I watched, you know, a lot of people promote the Jake Atlas story, talking about it, and would not mention the guy that was getting beat up or had gotten beat up or whatever in that situation. And they just wouldn't say that it was Duke Hudson, aka Brandon Vink. So what? He's gay. So what? You know, but we don't want to out him. So what? It's public information now. You got the police report. If you like, it's ridiculous. You know, like, so what? The guy's gay. We don't want to out him though. It's like, come on. But yeah, there are situations like that where I kind of shake my head and be like, okay, whatever. You know, don't say things like we don't believe in saying the names of victims, and then you don't have no problem talking about Tom Cole, who was one of the victims in the Ring Boy scandal. You don't have no problems plastering his name all over the place, or Nancy Argentino, or Nancy Benoit, or anybody else. Stop it. You know, the guy who's Sonny allegedly killed in a car accident, his name was mentioned in some of these stories and involved that situation. All that privacy crap, it's all one of those things where it's all political. It's bullshit. You know, you choose when you're going to talk about the victim and when you're not. And just say that. You know, like, we choose to not use the victim's name in this story because of X reason. Don't say we don't do this as a policy, and I know you're lying. Alright, so next questions. Park and Hunt, he has 5 questions. He or she has 5 questions. 1. What are some of your favorite rivalries in wrestling? Well, I'm a huge fan of course, the Bret Hart Shawn Michaels rivalry. I loved it. You know, it was so much fun. And then WWE allows for rivalries to go for much longer due to the nature of the product. You know, and it usually takes for your company to exist for a long time before you can do that. And this is one of the legs up that WWE has over other promotions, that they seemingly are around for so long that guys can fight for a decade, like Cena and Randy Orton, or Cena and Edge. You know, you can have those really long arcs where they can wrestle each other as baby faces, then switch, and then they can be tag team partners at one point and all kinds of stuff. I was also a big fan of the storyline rivalry between The Rock and Mankind, mainly because of how Vince McMahon was used in that storyline, and due to the character arc of Mankind at the time as a sort of guy who was looking for an attachment. I think I did videos on this about, Mankind's character was a guy who was constantly looking for a family. He had Uncle Paul. He was calling Sable Mommy, and he called Vince McMahon Dad. So that was sort of his character arc, and you got to see that over the course of years. Like, Mankind debuted in 1995. This storyline I'm talking about is 1998. And they just kept going with it. Like, so you got an opportunity to really get in there with that. So I really liked The Rock and Mankind. I thought that was fun. The Cena and Edge stories were okay. I felt like, it was a different time, obviously. But a lot of the stuff that I really enjoyed was stuff when I was a kid. The Warrior and Randy Savage story, the Savage and Roberts, that stuff was very good. Second question. Even though you are boycotting both, do you generally prefer Marvel or DC? I am generally a Marvel guy. Make mine Marvel. DC is cool and all, but I really don't like most DC characters. I like street level DC characters. I actually have like a one of the Birds of Prey books Chuck Dixon wrote, like one of the trades. It actually made me like Black Canary and Oracle, because I normally wouldn't like those characters, but I was like, hey, this is actually not bad. But I generally like Marvel more, because I'm a big fan of Daredevil and the Punisher and the more street level Marvel characters and Iron Man. So, more Marvel. 3. What are some of your favorite Hell in a Cell matches and moments? Well, obviously, the king of all Hell in a Cell matches, Undertaker and Mankind, is my favorite. I think Shawn and Undertaker probably my second favorite. Now, as the Hell in a Cell gimmick has been overexposed, it's hard because they started to run together at a point, because a lot of them are bloodless and it's just guys doing stuff to each other with steps and chairs and shit. I love the Batista and Triple H one too. That one was another one of my favorite. Those are my top 3, I think. Undertaker and Mankind, Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, Batista and Triple H. That's definitely one of my my top 3. Some of my favorite moments. Oh God, when Triple H was about to hit Batista with the sledgehammer and he got powerbombed instead. That was great. To me, that was a great moment. It typifies sort of the story because of how Triple H had been using the sledgehammer on everybody up to that point. So that was really fun. 4. Can you please do more on the mythology of wrestling? Absolutely. I'll be doing some more videos on mythology, psychology, different things like that in the future. 5. What are some things WWE does better than AEW and vice versa? Alright, WWE, again, they allow for longer form stories. Because when you go into WWE, you go into the WWE universe. It's set up for you to have longer character arcs. Like there's this concept that I think is very interesting, and some people didn't understand it. Drew McIntyre wanted to go back to his original theme, his Broken Dreams thing, and he was told by Vince McMahon that it doesn't fit his character. And most people were like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "I get it. Like, he's not that guy anymore." Like, when you listen to the lyrics of the song and where the character is supposed to be going, it's supposed to be this Drew McIntyre is supposed to be the already fulfilled, self-actualized Drew McIntyre, as opposed to the Drew McIntyre from when he was a kid, or just younger. I think he was in his early 20s. That was Drew McIntyre looking into the future, like he was the future, and now he's like the current Drew McIntyre. So I understand that from like being able to let characters mature and to allow characters to grow. And AEW has not shown that they have found ways to revitalize characters after their original arcs. Like, they can create a great first arc or a great second arc, but then what do you do afterwards? Miro, for instance, had a great arc when he was the TNT champion. And then they started doing some wonderful things with Miro being God's favorite champion. But there was no second act to that. he lost the title and then was immediately lost in the shuffle. You know, they had this great idea with MJF and Cody, and they did a great thing there. But they had one match, and then they went separate. They went their separate ways, and it was like, huh? And then MJF was lost for a while before Jericho actually saved him. I know a lot of people they cringe at that, but Jericho did save MJF because, you know, what was MJF doing? He was floundering in his feud with John Moxley. They wasn't good. You know, the John Moxley MJF feud was not good. So it took for the Jericho to, you know, help him form the Pinnacle and really do all that stuff that kind of woke MJF back up. But WWE usually has something for the guy to go to next. They have a next program. AEW typically doesn't have a next program. What AEW does better, I think they have a faster paced product in terms of not just the in-ring, but they seemingly have plans for certain people, and they don't deviate from those plans. They kind of stick with it, which I wish sometimes WWE would do. They also protect their performers better in terms of wins and losses. WWE will have people lose 4 days before a title shot, and then they win the title, and you'd be like, this guy just fucking lost. Like, what's going on here? So it makes you not care when people are just getting beat. But at the same time, you know, if they beat 100 nobodies, then nobody cares about that either. AEW also, I think, has a more focused in-ring product, and as such as they focus more on it. I wish WWE would give wrestlers more time to work matches. You know, again, not cold matches, by the way, but actual main event style matches. Like, there's a lot of matches that WWE will have on Raw or SmackDown, and they will give them almost no time, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, and, you know, in a disqualification or something like that, where it doesn't really happen in AEW. And that allows for people to get used to the idea of clean finishes. You know, get used to the idea that there's somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. And then you could throw the wrench in there and it's a disqualification. You could throw a wrench in there and it's a count out or a run in or something like that. Using those things more conservatively, the count outs and disqualifications. I like that about AEW. So those are some of the things I think they do differently. Bradley Gamble, not really a question, but I am a big fan of your book reviews, and since you're a Detroit guy, it would be great if you did a review of Blood and Fire. It's a new biography of Detroit wrestling legend The Sheik, written by wrestling historian and former WWE magazine editor Brian Solomon. I have started reading that book, actually, so you definitely will be getting one. I'll also be doing a review of the book on Gorgeous George. So I at least got 2 planned. I wonder if I lost my notes to the Gorgeous George book. I probably still have it around here somewhere. But I'm gonna try to get 3 or 4 books and read those before I start reopening the library for the year. I'm gonna do library at certain parts of the year and then close it. Give me a chance to read some more stories and stuff like that. So that's nice from Bradley Gamble. G Coalition. We got 3 questions. 1. If both Judgment Day and Original Bullet Club were to be sustained for a year plus, feuding with both each other and with separate opponents during this time, who would you add to both factions and why? Well, for starters, I don't like the Bullet Club. I don't even like the idea of the Bullet Club. So I probably would have broken them up pretty quickly because I would more than likely throw Finn Balor into Judgment Day. That would probably be more my thing. But let's say that, you know, we're going to keep it. We're going to keep everything the same. We're not going to throw Finn Balor into Judgment Day. So who would I put into Bullet Club? I would probably put somebody who is... when I look at the Bullet Club, I say, okay, who is it? Like, who has, traditionally been members of the Bullet Club? At that point, it'd be like Kevin Owens, because it'd be like indie guys. And so Kevin Owens would definitely be one of them. And I would definitely consider that. So as far as Judgment Day, Ciampa is, if you're not going to put Balor in there, Ciampa is one of those guys. It'd be him. Shotzi is another one I would look to put in the Judgment Day, because I think she's a big fan of horror movies, and I think that you have something that's dark and gothic, and I always kind of saw Elvira and Shotzi. Like when they did the Halloween thing and she was doing like the dress ups and everything, that seemed to fit her and her character. You know, the character, it seems to fit. It seemed like her natural interest, that she would be into monster movies and horror type of stuff. So Judgment Day would probably be so interesting for her that it would probably bring out that in her. So Kevin Owens into the original Bullet Club, because I think he would be in it if he was on the Independents anyway, and probably Shotzi into Judgment Day. Second question. Do you think there's anything to the idea of The Rock getting investors to help him buy WWE from Vince McMahon, with Nick Khan running day-to-day operations in exchange for selling Vince back the XFL? I think that if Vince wanted the XFL, he wouldn't have sold it. So I don't think he would. And plus, you know, if I was Vince, I would be trying to buy an NFL team. Fuck the XFL. Like, it was cool to have your own league, but it flopped twice. You know, Vince is going to sell WWE. That's a lot of money, by the way, to buy the WWE. That's a lot of money. Where is The Rock going to get the financing? That's my question. Because, you know, you have to have Amazon money, Disney money, in order to buy WWE. The Rock, I don't think he got that kind of cash. He probably got those kinds of friends, but I don't think he got that kind of cash. You know, and plus, I don't know if The Rock really wants to run a wrestling promotion. You know, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be, you know, off-put by it, but I really would question whether he would be interested in running a wrestling promotion. Third question. Your thoughts on the whole Kota Ibushi New Japan Yakuza scuttlebutt going on right now? Now, I didn't do a video on this because it didn't seem like enough people cared, but I was absolutely floored by a lot of the stuff that was going on with Kota Ibushi. And I noticed that as soon as he started talking about the Yakuza, that's when people started paying attention. Like when he was talking about his mom tried to commit suicide and Kikuchi was treating him like shit. And here's the long and the short of it for people who are like, what is going on with Kota Ibushi? All right, so it's difficult to tell when it started, but Kota Ibushi went to Just Tap Out, which is Taka Michinoku's wrestling promotion. He made an unannounced visit to that promotion. He was on television. He has an exclusive contract in New Japan, so he's in breach of contract. Because he was in breach of contract, New Japan decided to contact him and say, hey, look, you're breaching your contract. He was kind of like, because he's Kota Ibushi, he thinks he can do whatever he wants. And then they tried to get him to come back early for, I forget what show it was. They tried to get him to come back, but he was still injured and he couldn't come back. He felt like they were threatening him if he didn't come back early. But he felt like he would die if he did. He's being very dramatic in those tweets too. The long and the short of it is he started having problems with this guy named Kikuchi in New Japan, who was one of the bosses. And he started putting out these series of tweets about him and Kikuchi and all the problems they were having. And then he had the whole situation with his mom. Then Kikuchi threatened to fire him. And it got crazy. And then he tweeted out Yakuza, and everybody just froze. It was like freezing for like a couple of weeks because everybody was like, oh, you know how serious this is, because there have been entire promotions shut down. Like Pride was shut down because of Yakuza interference. And it's like Yakuza have almost always been involved in the combat sports leagues, like, you know, Ricky Dozan and all this shit. Like, they have a history of this stuff. But then they had the big press conference where New Japan apologized to Kota Ibushi. They apparently are going to fire Kikuchi or demote him. And in all of this, it was kept very quiet that they were talking about cutting Kota Ibushi's pay due to him breaching his contract, because he was not supposed to make any disparaging remarks against New Japan, nor put out any personal information that he has on New Japan. He threatened to do that. He threatened to out Kikuchi. He threatened to out Cheater's Goon, which was Takamichinoku and Taichi. Then he's also shared personal information between him and Kikuchi through the tweets. So he violated his contract 2 or 3 times, and he has to take a pay cut. And he's still hurt, but he didn't get fired. And it seemed like the only thing people cared about is that he didn't get fired. It's like they asking the fucking guy to take a pay cut. I know that Kota Ibushi's rich. It doesn't matter. I'm like, fuck you. He's taking a pay cut. You know, this is essentially, now we don't know if it's a fine, and maybe the interpreter misinterpreted what they were saying, but it said salary reduction. So that means that he's not going to make as much money as he was making before. So that doesn't sound good. I wouldn't take that if I was Kota Ibushi. I'm pretty sure he don't give a fuck about the job. You know, he's already hurt. He's sitting on the sideline. He can't do anything else without their permission. And, you know, he gets a little fiery on Twitter and everything. Now he's got to take a pay cut. I mean, at least he got rid of the guy that he was trying to get rid of. But that whole thing is very, very ugly. And I'm surprised none of his elders stepped in, like Tanahashi or you know, somebody like that stepped in and asked him, you know, pulled him to the side and say, "Hey, look, what are you doing? You know, you're killing us here, buddy." But I noticed, to double back to the whole thing about the wrestling media, I noticed how so many people were not talking about the Kota Ibushi stuff as it was buzzing on Twitter. You know, there was a lot of people saying, "Oh, we don't know that much about what's going on. He's got a problem with the front office." It's like, it's a little bit more deeper than that. If his mom tried to kill herself, it's a little bit deeper than, you know, he's got beef with one dude in the front office. I mean, come on, let's be real about this. So let's continue. Let's see. Keith Bearcat Lee. Will my Thunderdome era hero and cutie Keith Bearcat Lee ever receive a major role in AEW? I think so. I think it's eventually. Mainly because Tony Khan seems to bend to the whims of the audience. But I think that they just signed so many people that it's very difficult for them to keep track of them. Him as being TNT champion for a long time or something like that, maybe one day. But that's about it. Alright, so we got Alto Johnson. He got 3 questions. 1. Was your favorite moments of the Civil War comics? Oh Jesus, the fake Thor was hilarious. It was so bad. It was so bad. But I get why they created the fake Thor. So here's the angle. I think, was it Iron Man? Iron Man created the fake Thor. I think Mr. Fantastic kind of helped him with it. The idea was to scare Captain America and the rest of the guys into quitting because Thor would be on their side. It all went awry as they ended up murdering another hero because the fake Thor went nuts and killed a guy. And you could tell that Martin Miller, when he wrote this shit, he didn't think it all the way through, and he didn't give a damn about the characters. He really didn't. Like that whole thing with the Punisher, when he just gunned down these villains and then got beat up by Captain America. Like, Punisher just shooting random hoods and murdering them in front of everybody, I didn't like that. I did like when Captain America beat his ass and Frank wouldn't fight back. I did like that. Because it has been sort of in the comics from the 90s, like the Punisher looked up to Captain America. They had done a story before, I don't remember what it was, but it was a Punisher Captain America story where Captain America was sort of lecturing Frank about how he doesn't like his methods and he doesn't really like him and all that kind of stuff. But there was a mutual respect there because Captain America understands that Frank was in Vietnam. So you have this World War II vet in Captain America who was a hero to the Vietnam veteran, the Punisher, but he's still kind of disgusted by the Punisher too. But there's a mutual respect there because they were both military guys. And I think at the end of that book, they salute one another. If I remember correctly, I may be misremembering it. I don't know if I have that book somewhere around here or not. Or did I read it online? I don't remember. But it's from when the Punisher was hot. So maybe in the early 90s. So it was already established in Marvel that the Punisher and Captain America had a relationship. And that they, it was a complete and total respect from the Punisher to Captain America. And I thought that was a great moment when, when Captain America's like, "Fight back, you coward, you piece of garbage." And Frank's like, "Not you. I'll fight anybody, I won't fight you." It was out of character for Captain America, though, to just absolutely beat the tar out of the Punisher like that. That was OOC. There was so much stuff that was out of character for, the Civil War comics. I mean, come on. Spider-Man outing himself, taking off his mask. Crazy moment. Especially since I think we were dealing with kid Spider-Man at the time too. Like he was he might have still been a teenager, but he wasn't fully an adult yet. At least I don't think so. But that was crazy. So those moments, the initial storyline started with it's not the Thunderbolts. What was the New Warriors? I think it was, where they blew up the school bus. And it was a complete total accident. I think Nitro blew up, and his powers, went awry, and he destroyed a school bus and killed all these kids. And that led to the Civil War in the first place. And I thought that was an excellent, inciting event. In terms of, if you really want to have a reason why the heroes are going to fight each other, having metahumans or superhumans or whoever who are completely and totally combustible, who have no control over their own powers, running amok in the streets and killing innocent people, seemed to be a perfect reason why you would enact this Superhuman Registration Act. It's a good reason for it, because we see it was supposed to be an analog to gun control in the United States. And what happens is, every time there's a school shooting, we start having conversations about gun control. So what happens is, they ported that into the comic books, where this superhero or villain, I think he was a villain, he was a hero, he went nuts, his powers exploded, he killed a bunch of kids, and now all of the superhumans have to register, and Iron Man is like chief among them. Like, let's go. And all right, let's look at the second question from Alto Johnson. What's your top 5 Denzel Washington movies, and you rank as your favorites? Malcolm X, of course, is there. Training Day, obviously, was the one that took it to the next level. I was a big fan of Training Day. He did a movie where Russell Crowe was like this cyborg villain. What the hell was that movie called? My brother loves that movie. Virtuosity, I think it's called. I actually kind of liked it too. Like, I've seen it so many times that I kind of am disgusted by it, but I do like the movie. I think it's called Virtuosity. It's Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. It's a fun little film. Mo Better Blues. Big fan of Mo Better Blues. He was a jazz singer or jazz musician in that movie. There's probably some more. Denzel Washington is my favorite actor. Philadelphia is another really good one. He plays a lawyer for an AIDS, a gay man who feels like he's being discriminated against in Philadelphia. It's a great dramatic movie, especially considering everybody thinks he's gay in that movie. So it's like, one scene was my favorite scene. Is he's ran into, I think he's like in a grocery store or a pharmacy or something, and some black man walks up to him and shakes his hand, talks about what he's doing is great, and then he says that he's gay, and Denzel's character is like, okay. And that becomes like the running gag throughout the movie, is that everybody thinks that because he believes that in this case that he must be gay too. And it's like, no, he's not. He's a straight man who's fighting for the rights of this gay man who was discriminated against, and now this guy's got AIDS and everything. So it was a really fun movie. I really like that film. I love Samuel L. Jackson too. 1A and 1B is my favorite actor. Alto Johnson's third question. Are interested in a younger American president instead of old and out of touch guys. It would be nice if we could find the right young guy to be the president. Now, in the United States, you have to be 35 to run for president. I don't think anybody would honestly vote for somebody who's 35 unless they were super successful. They would have to be like this uber successful 35-year-old. And you have to be uber successful in a way that makes sense to the average person. But when you're 35 and, or you're 40 or something like that, there's going to be a lot of questions that's going to come up, So, family situations are going to come up. Do you even have children, let alone young children? So that's going to affect your thoughts on things like, education, crime, and, where have you been living the last 10 to 15 years? What have you been doing? What were you doing? Were you a college professor like Barack Obama, or, before he went into politics, or are you into doing something else? Like, what were you doing? And I think we should focus on that kind of stuff. It sounds like a good idea to get a younger guy in there, but the question would be is what kind of young guy? And I think sometimes the younger guys are more out of touch than the older guys are, because they don't have the same morals and the same obligations. All right, Doc. What do you think Tony Khan can't seem to get behind tag teams, FTR and Santana and Ortiz? I think that when you look at the tag team division, I think he's listening to the Young Bucks too much. You know, I think those guys have got way too much authority in the tag team division, personally. You know, FTR should have been running the shop for a long time. Santana and Ortiz should have been at least in the mix. I'm not saying they should be the champions, but they should be in the mix. Right now, I mean, I kind of figured they were dead when they lost to Best Friends in that street fight. I was like, oh, hell no. You know, that wasn't good at all. You know, and then they get back into their car and drive off with their mommy, and I'm like, oh, hell no. I just think that he's listening too much to the Young Bucks. They have too much sway over what goes on in the tag team division, personally. You know, maybe he'll double back to FTR, but Santana and Ortiz definitely going to need some help because Tony Khan is not looking in their direction at all. WG Phil, with Sasha and Naomi possibly quitting or getting fired, who would be the 3 women you'd build the women's tag team division either by calling up 2.0 talent like Casey and Jaden or main roster teams like Shayna and Natalya? I'm guessing you mean 3 teams. I think Toxic Attraction is really good. I think they work as a team and as a unit. Plus, I don't think Gigi or JC is ready yet to go off on their own. So, I would definitely keep them as one of the teams. I think Katana Chance, they've changed her name to, and Kaden Carter is another good team to use. They're different. They're fast. You know, dynamic team. Remind you, they could be like the girl version of the Rockers or the Rock and Roll Express. I would get a bruiser team. That's where you would get Shayna and Natalya, sort of a bruising team. But I don't like Natalya, so I'm just kind of sitting here trying to figure out anybody can replace Natalya. Can we bring back Nia Jax and have Nia Jax and Tamina again, and have like the female bloodline? You know, that would be nice. But also, somebody like Dana Brooke would probably work in the tag team division with the right partner. I think Carmella would be a good partner for her. I didn't mind her tag team with Mandy Rose either. I thought it was not bad, to be quite honest. But they have a lot of stray characters. You could also team up people who are somewhat similar. You know, as far as Io Shirai would be a great tag team wrestler. You know, you could team her with Saray. You know, I know you want to team up all the Japanese girls. Like, yes, I want to team up the Japanese girls. That's what I want to do. So, who cares? You know, who cares if they're Japanese or they're a tag team? Who cares? So you can put together teams. You know, I would use Toxic Attraction as the centerpiece because I think they're probably the most over tag team. They're already a unit and it already works. Then I think you would, you know, find other people to satellite them in terms of how to build a tag team division. His second question. Next month will be the 10-year anniversary of NXT 1.0 Black and Gold, with Seth becoming the inaugural NXT champion. In hindsight, where did 1.0 go wrong, and how should 2.0 avoid making the same mistake? Well, what happened is NXT got full of itself. Triple H got very popular on the dirt sheets and on the internet with his style of booking, which is to basically run a super indie. So hire all the indie talents in the world, have big surprises. Every takeover, there's a new person coming in, even if he didn't do anything with them. They would, you know, sit in the crowd, and then they find a way to work them into the show. And it became a super indie where all the indie guys were getting pushed, and all the WWE developmental guys were sitting on the wayside. Now, you still do need indie talent. Now, don't get me wrong, you do need indie talent. But they need to keep the focus on your developmental talent. The people that you're bringing in, that you are paying to train. Not that you are paying to work. That's what the indie talents are. They've already been trained. You're paying to teach them where the cameras are and how to do WWE style. Those are other people that you're paying to actually be there. And those are the people that you need to pay more attention to. So as long as they keep, and that's the one positive thing about AEW coming around, is it put their boot on NXT's neck. And NXT had to learn that you're still a WWE product. You know, you're still WWE, no matter how much you don't want to be. You know, Triple H with his old chocolate and vanilla bullshit that he was pulling with Vince. It's like, hell no. You know, run a company. Investors looking for marketable stars that can main event WrestleMania, not indie guys. And it made me really not like the indie style because it started bleeding too much into WWE. And I already didn't like it, but I could deal with it if I was going to watch Ring of Honor and get Ring of Honor. That's what I wanted. Like, sometimes you want broccoli. Sometimes you want a steak. You should be able to go to McDonald's and get a cheeseburger. I don't want McDonald's trying to sell me broccoli. I don't want that. Stick to what you know how to do. And that's what the lines got crossed when it comes to NXT. They became way too big for their britches. His third question. John Cena also has an anniversary coming up from his 2002 debut. What do you think will be John Cena's legacy whenever he hangs it up for good? And how would you or wish WWE would book his send-off run before he officially retires? Top 5 throwback jersey looks or Cena t-shirts. I don't remember too much about the throwback jerseys. That was an awkward time. I liked the Cena t-shirt era though, because it was just the same shirt in different colors. they were really just kind of making the same shirts in different colors. So it's kind of hard to say what would my top 5 be, because it was, the Mitchell and Ness era was pretty good for him though, like, because those were hot at the time, which was like 03, 04. I think it might have been during his rapping gimmick. But I think John Cena's legacy is he's the modern day Bruno for a lot of young people. He's a modern day Hulk Hogan. He's going to be the greatest champion they've ever seen. And in 15 years, a lot of them are going to still be like, man, I was such a huge fan of John Cena. No matter how much they like New Japan and all that kind of shit, or they even stop watching wrestling. When John Cena's older, and he's got gray in his beard, because he's eventually going to grow a beard, he's going to be seen as being the best from their era. Even though people in our generation, if you're in your mid-30s, late 30s or whatever, you're going to say John Cena sucks, and everything he did sucks, and whatever. You got to take into account a lot of those children are going to be looking back and saying that everything John Cena was fantastic, and they believed in him. And that's going to be his legacy. He made WWE palatable for advertisers and sponsors because he was very child friendly. He understood the product. He was never one of those guys who went out there like Undertaker did, or Batista did, or Brock did, or Goldberg, or Triple H, and criticized Vince McMahon's direction of the product. Randy Orton has even done it. Like, he has been the one guy that has been the biggest proponent of what WWE is today. John Cena has been that guy, and he has typified that by, you would have. It's amazing how many people, when he started doing Peacemaker and he was cussing and Suicide Squad and stuff like that, they were dumbfounded that John Cena was still an adult. Like, they couldn't imagine that John Cena would actually have sex or kill or curse, because he had been such the arrowhead for this PG product for so long. That's his legacy. He's Mr. Rogers for, this generation, or the Cyclops from the X-Men. If Vince is Professor Xavier, John Cena is Cyclops. He's the true believer, and he went out there and made it possible and made it happen. So that's his legacy. Fourth question. God, see, X-Men popped into my head for a reason, because the fourth question involves X-Men. When the X-Men officially joins the Marvel Cinematic Universe, would you make Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver re-debut as the Brotherhood of Mutants, or would you cast and who would you cast as the original 5 X-Men: Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, Angel, and Beast? I would not, unless you're gonna do a new dimension kind of thing, where it's like we're gonna introduce a Quicksilver from another dimension, which means you're also gonna have to introduce Scarlet Witch from another dimension. And like, we just dealt with Scarlet Witch, so probably not. I probably wouldn't bring them. I have any actors in mind, to be quite honest, because I don't know actors that well. The TLD. Do you think the Butch character is a slight against Jeff Hardy, running in the crowd and acting like a petulant child? Or am I just late? I don't think so. I'm not sure what Butch is. He seems to be just like a feral, street urchin. But I'm pretty sure it has nothing to do with Jeff. If it was about Jeff, they would probably have him do, mimic Jeff's moves and stuff like that. Maybe do a whisper in the wind. But they're pretty much letting Pete Dunne work his matches like he's always worked them. So, no, I don't think so. Black Saiyan 97. He got 3 questions. 1. What are your favorite wrestling belts? The original, not the original Intercontinental Championship. The 80s and 90s Intercontinental Championship. Number 1. Beautiful belt. Probably the most beautiful belt ever put together. 2. The Winged Eagle. WWF Championship. I love that belt. The big gold belt, the NWA World Heavyweight title. I love that belt too. The 10 pounds of gold always looked very cool to me. I hate the X Division title. It's so cheesy. So those are probably my favorite belts. 2. Do you think WWE should start using more licensed music for their wrestlers? Vince don't want to spend the money, man. Vince don't want to spend the money on licensed music, man. I think that if there was some type of loophole where Vince could use licensed music, he would. But especially since he doesn't sell CDs anymore of original music, he probably would. But I don't think he would use licensed music if he could, because a lot of licensed music that a wrestler would want would have to be censored a lot, especially in modern day. A lot of that stuff has to be censored. Black Saiyan 97's third question: who would win in a street fight between ODB and Eazy-E? Well, Eazy-E was like 5'6", and he was pretty much in his right mind most of the time. ODB, I don't think he was ever in his right mind. So I think that if ODB was starting to lose the fight, it'd turn into a brawl pretty quickly, because Wu-Tang wouldn't let it go that way. And then somebody gets shot, because Eazy-E, again, is 5'4" or some nonsense like that. So he more than likely would have had a gun. So I don't see it being much of a fight. But if you would put gloves on him and put him in a ring, probably ODB. He'd have the reach advantage, and he'd probably be a little bit crazier. Again, there's nothing you could do about Eazy-E being a midget. There's not much you could do about that. DeAndre Dukes, he's got 7 questions. Question 1. Which head booker did you enjoy? Vince Russo, Ed Koskey, or Brian Gerwitz? Brian Gerwitz. He seemed to have more of a handle on the humor aspect of wrestling. I was not a fan of him and The Rock basically turning the show into stand-up comedy, but at least he had a plan. Koski was okay. Vince Russo, it was a short amount of time that Vince Russo's writing style was pretty good. And once I realized that Vince Russo was basically just, jocking ECW and, Jerry Springer and just slamming shit together, I'm not, it's okay. I'm not going to shit on Russo completely. He did do some things that made sense, but he also did a lot of stuff that didn't make any sense. And it didn't make any sense in WWF, WCW, or TNA. So, but I'm going to go with Brian Gerwitz for this question, because I think Gerwitz probably has, I think he probably got a lot more of his shit done than most of these people too. 2, what's your all-time favorite movie? House of Flying Daggers. I love that movie. I also love Hero. I also, big fan of Boys in the Hood, but I think House of Flying Daggers is probably my favorite movie. I love that movie. I also, I wouldn't call it one of my favorite movies. Never mind. 3, are the wrestlers today way worse than those of the past when it comes to having a big ego? I don't think so, because I think a lot of wrestlers today, a lot of them have grown up only knowing WWE as the major wrestling promotion. Therefore, they kind of figured when they go in, they're going to be doing silly stuff, getting hit in the face with pies, getting covered in water, all kind of shit. In the past, though, a lot of those dudes were taught that wrestling was legit and that you better be able to handle yourself, and therefore they had a lot more, stiff opinions on stuff that they would do and wouldn't do. Like, you had guys like Honky Tonk Man refusing to put people over. You had guys like, Greg the Hammer Valentine. Neither one of these guys were, heavy. Like, I know Honky Tonk Man main evented some B shows as the Intercontinental Champion. I know that. But he was never seen as being like a Hulk Hogan level, this doesn't work for me, brother kind of guy. But that kind of shit permeated the territory era. There was tons of those fucking guys. Eventually, they made their way to WWE, where Vince encountered one at a time. Harley Race, Dusty Rhodes, just bonking them on the head like I'm the boss. Bop, bop, bop. But a lot of these people nowadays, they kind of come into WWE knowing that Vince is the boss, and they may still have a big ego and not want to do certain things, but they already know Vince is the boss. I don't think they were fighting him, and more than the guys in the past. I'm pretty sure more guys in the past were more of a headache for Vince than these guys today. And as far as people complaining, I think they complain more today because of social media. Like I wouldn't, like, no matter how upset I think a certain guy would have gotten, I don't think they would have ever tweeted about it. I don't know, because they wanted to protect kayfabe. They definitely would have been tweeting about it. So they're probably bigger crybabies today, but I don't think the ego is about the same, to be quite honest. 4, why do people try so hard to make everything woke when it always fails more times than succeeding? Good marketing. That's what wokeness is all about. Wokeness is basically marketing. Public relations. It's pretending to care about something because you think that's what the audience cares about. If and it's pretty sad, but that's kind of how things are in the world, where people want to, what they call conscious capitalism, or the ESGs and all this crap, where everybody wants to feel like they're supporting somebody who cares about the same things that they care about. And so you will often see, especially this is June, so that there's rainbows everywhere because everybody's pretending to care about the gays even if they really don't. And it's just marketing. It's bullshit, So they use wokeness to market, and then if it flops, they'll just say that you're a racist, sexist, homophobe, whatever, and that's why it flopped. And so it has a built-in excuse for why it fails, because the audience are racist or whatever. 5, how long do you see AEW still in business? I think it depends on what Discovery is looking for in their product. If Discovery is okay, I can see them lasting maybe 10 years, maybe. If Discovery doesn't want them, I think you probably get maximum 5. I think they probably get whatever. They're going to finish up whatever this is. I think they got till 2023 on their contract. They'll probably have to go sign somewhere else, which likely will be a smaller station than Turner. And it'll probably be a slow bleed from there. But I don't think they'll ever, completely bail out. Like, TNA is still alive, That's one of the things I always tell people. Like, TNA is still alive. 6, how do you feel about Elon Musk buying Twitter? I like that Elon Musk is buying Twitter because I like that he's just basically telling, so Southern California to go fuck themselves. He's going to do whatever he wants. But I don't see Elon Musk as being the savior that a lot of people are seeing. Clearly, he's going to have to do something in order to make up the ad revenue, especially if he's talking about he's going to make it a free speech platform, which means you're going to be able to go in there and call people faggots and all that kind of stuff. Then he's going to definitely lose a lot of advertising. And once that happens, that $45 billion or whatever he's about to put into this, he don't want to lose that. He's not in this to lose money. He's in this to make money. And so he's already said that he's going to try to have some type of paid side to Twitter where, in order to get preferential treatment, you're going to have to pay a little bit. And there's already some people who say they're willing to do it. Maybe in order to get a blue check mark, you got to pay $5 to $10. Charge government officials and the media, whatever, to be on Twitter. Maybe that's what he's going to do in order to cover up the sponsorship revenue he's going to end up losing if you make it a free speech platform. You can go in there and misgender, quote unquote, people. It's going to be crazy. But he's still going to have some kind of rules because that's just how these platforms work. They still have guidelines in order to ban people from them. So I don't look at it like he's a savior. I look at it as, he basically got upset that his favorite accounts were getting banned and said, fuck it, I'm going to take it over. And then, we're going to go back to having fun, which is, okay, fine. His 7th question. How would you have booked the Hogan versus Sting match of Starrcade 97? I certainly would not have had Sting get pinned. I wouldn't have done the false finish at all. I just would have had Sting win. Sting would have got hit with the big leg drop. He would have kicked out. he would have hulked up on Hogan. It would have been the ultimate turnaround. And Hogan hits his big move, and Sting fires up, beats his chest, Stinger splash, Stinger splash on the other side. Hogan goes down. He puts him in the Scorpion Deathlock, and maybe this is where the NWO come in. Sting bops a couple of people. Hogan tries to attack him from behind with a chair or something like that. Sting dodges it. Scorpion Death Drop, 1, 2, 3. Simple. No problems. I wouldn't have tried to make it too complicated, all the extra referees and all that shit. I wouldn't even done all that. Just book it like a regular match with Sting going over like a superhero. That simple. Alto Johnson has 4 more questions. 1. Who's your most underrated tag team stable in wrestling that don't get enough credit? Currently, I don't know. I don't know who it is currently. I think Toxic Attraction doesn't give enough credit. I think people are too enamored with how they look and how the characters are presented, and not really that into what they're doing. And I think what they've been doing has been very interesting and very intriguing. And I'm a big fan of them. I think a lot of people underrate the Nexus. There was just too many people in the Nexus. I think if they'd have focused on 3 or 4 of them and let the other ones be just like ancillary characters, that would have been fine. But Nexus is a little bit underrated. Tag team, London and Kendrick. Paul London will, if you were to Google him or pay attention to anything he's doing recently, you dislike him. But back then, London and Kendrick were tremendous. They were a great tag team in like 07, 08 SmackDown era. They were really fun. Really fun guys in order to watch work at a time where they actually somewhat cared about tag team wrestling. Also was a big fan of the Benoit Angle tag team. I like them as a tag team too. I think they were the tag team champions when I came back to watching wrestling. They were a fun tag team. I also liked the Rey Mysterio and Rob Van Dam tag team. I thought they were fun too. As far as stables, it's hard to tell. I was never I'm not a huge fan of big stables. Usually a stable of like 3 or 4 is more my style. Once it gets to like 6 or 7 members, I'm kind of like, I'm bailing out. Well, whatever. His second question, is the Horsewomen overrated? I think they're all good. I just think that there's been 6 or 7 years of sustained push between the 4 of them, and they have blocked off too many opportunities for other people. Now it may have been necessary in order to get certain people over. Like, it was necessary for them to dedicate to the 4 Horsewomen in order to get the Becky Lynch that we got, in order to give Bayley time to grow. But that just meant that Sasha and Charlotte were over pushed, and they were there constantly because they were the best at the time. It took Becky and Bayley a long time to get in their groove. But, I can say that they may be over pushed. I wouldn't say that they're overrated. Number 3, where did your disdain for the X-Men come from? It came from X-Men fans. Similar to AEW, when people have just been pushing X-Men on me, it's like, yes, I like the X-Men, okay? Everybody likes the fucking X-Men. We don't have to act like everything X-Men does is great and fantastic and everything. It's like, for fuck's sake. They had a lot of garbage characters, had a lot of garbage storyline. Like the Onslaught storyline was absolutely confusing and it was stupid. The X-Men been in space. I was never a big fan of the X-Men in space. I'm sorry. I like the X-Men on Earth. I've never liked the idea of them up in space. Cyclops' daddy being a space pirate. I was never a big fan of that stuff. I understand they was doing crazy shit in order to keep the comic books running. But I was like, ugh. But that was basically what it was X-Men fans are so fucking annoying that they turned me off of a lot of the X-Men. I read some of the seminal stuff, like God Loves, Man Kills, The Mutant Massacre. I've read that stuff. But I never wanted to be one of those guys that went all the way back and started reading all the Claremont X-Men. Because it's like, it's the greatest stuff ever. I'm just kind of like, it's okay. But do I really need to read X-Force? No, I don't. Cable is cool, but do I need to read X-Force? No, I don't. Do I really need to read a lot of the other X-Men stuff? No, I don't. people can live their lives and love comic books and love the X-Men without ever knowing all of these ancillary characters that you are required to know to be a big fan of the X-Men. Like, no, I don't fucking care about Domino. All right, I don't give a shit. You know. 4. Why aren't there any free-thinking wrestlers speaking out about how current wrestling has been sedated by liberal politics? Probably because they're scared that they won't get booked if they do. You know, I think that when you look at wrestling, I think wrestling probably per capita has more right-wingers in it, if you listen to them and watch their tweets and stuff like that, than they're willing to admit. The problem is a lot of them just learn to shut the fuck up. It's the typical thing with conservatives and libertarians. They just learn that you live in a liberal world and your boss is more likely going to be liberal as hell and the audience is too. So if you say something that they don't like, they come after you and try to take your job away. So you just learn to shut up. And you learn to be quiet until maybe you're on the outside looking in. And then you start tweeting out crazy shit like Val Venus did. Like, we didn't really get a lot of bullshit out of Val Venus until like a certain point where he was not being booked anymore and he was pretty much mostly out of the business. Disco Inferno, another one. He's mostly out of the business before his political stuff really kicked in. You know, and I think there's going to be a lot of wrestlers who are going to, you know, once they get to a certain point, they're going to start coming out as more conservative, libertarian, or whatever. But while they're in there, like especially young wrestlers, nah. They're going to want to protect those bookings. They're not going to want to argue about that kind of shit with these people all day on Twitter and stuff. All right, now, let's see. The Ninja. What is your favorite wrestling attire? Purple Undertaker gloves. That's the Undertaker I grew up on. Yes, I was there watching when he debuted, but the purple gloves are absolutely iconic. It's mint. Purple and black. It works. The Ninja second question, favorite finisher? I'm going to just go with Tombstone Power Driver. I also love the Sweet Chin Music. I love both of those. I love the Sharpshooter too. It's my favorite submission hold. Is the Sharpshooter. So those three are my favorite moves. Super AJ Styles Nick. When did you first start watching WWE? I started watching in 1990. I started watching full time, I believe, in 1992. That's kind of when I started realizing what I was watching. Like in 1990, I was 6. I remember watching Royal Rumble 1990. It was the first wrestling show I ever seen. But I didn't start watching wrestling full time until 1992. And that's when I started figuring out where I could watch it. At this point, I'm 8. So I could, watch, Saturday morning cartoons and then watch wrestling and that kind of stuff. So that's when I started picking up the habit. So that's when it started. D-Mac, he's back. At the time of this question, I saw a tweet that got quite a bit of attention centering on wrestlers working each other like 20 times in a row and how they didn't think it would be fun. The response was interesting. I'll link the tweet below, but what's your take on wrestlers wrestling each other repeatedly on house show loops and TV? From your perspective as a fan, and hypothetically, how would you feel as a wrestler? I think I saw this. Yes, I believe I saw this. And there was a lot of guys who said that they worked each other for like months on end. As a wrestler, you would really get the feel for wrestling that guy. And you also, once you learn how to wrestle the guy and his style and everything, I would imagine you could then start freaking it. You can start doing different things. It's like working any other job. Like you learn what you're doing, the baseline of what you're doing first, and then you can start adding stuff and subtracting stuff as you go along. As a fan, considering I know a lot of this stuff is house shows, I'm never going to see it. So the guys can work as much as they want. I just wish they didn't do so many rematches on TV. And that's really like my whole thing. But I do think that these guys like wrestling each other. Like, I think Matt Hardy was telling a story about, him spending like a week or two wrestling Eddie Guerrero at house shows. And he had like some really funny stories to tell about all these different matches he was having with Eddie and how Eddie kept, going over time because he kept wanting to add stuff and subtract stuff and do different things. And I think that that's fascinating. It's fascinating. Like hearing about how many matches Steamboat and Flair had. It's fascinating stuff as a fan. I'm like, wow, they had so many more matches that we didn't even see. So it's like, yeah, that we know that the matches that they had and how good they were. You know, that's like Flair has said, like he's had better matches with Barry Windham or something like that on house show loops than he's ever had with him on TV. And you kind of feel like that's special, because if you were there for one of the matches at the house shows, that could have potentially been the match that was better than the one that we got on TV. It gives you an opportunity to try new things. So Darren Miles has 10 questions. All right. You mentioned in one video how you went to an anime convention and saw some degenerates. Please tell that story. All right. So anime conventions, they're typically, it's a different convention in the day than it is at night. In Detroit, there's this place called Yumicon. It's usually around Halloween. In the day, you will see plenty of children. It's completely PG. There's princesses. You might get the occasional man in drag. The occasional guy dressed up like Harley Quinn. But as soon as the sun goes down, that's when you start seeing people with anal tails. And what I mean by that is they sell these, like, you know, they sell cat ears and everything. They sell tails too, but they sell tails like a belt. You could buy a belt that has like a fox tail or something like that on it. When it started getting nighttime, that becomes an anal bead. And then you start seeing people stuffing that shit in their ass. The Yumicon is held in the old Kobo Arena. It's not, well, Kobo Hall, not Kobo Arena. It's now called the TCF Center. That place becomes an absolute den of iniquity at night. I'm talking, you can, like, they have hentai playing inside these rooms sometimes, and it's basically like, if you imagine what happened with Pee Wee Herman, and he's in this, you know, this theater, and people jacking off in the theater, they have that hentai in the anime conventions. There's women blowing dudes in the hallways of the hotel. I've seen that at these conventions. There's please believe it, these are dudes who probably have been there all day, but it's not like the Magic the Gathering kind of nerds that you would think of. It's more than likely somewhat guys who kind of like anime, but they still have sex, so they'll get like chicks to blow them in the bathroom, you know, or in the hallways of TCF Center, you know, chicks naked, titties out all over the place. I'm talking absolute degeneracy at night at these anime conventions. It's terrible. It's terrible. Like, not only does it smell bad in those places, but then it's just after a certain, and it's not even like super late. It's not like 2 a.m. or anything like that. I'm talking 8 at night. You know, it's motherfuckers jacking off and, you know, walking around dressed like the Gimp from Pulp Fiction. It's crazy. Absolute degeneracy. It's disgusting, bro. And then once they started drinking, like, they had a big party at one of them. It had to pay extra to get into the party. I had my own chick, so I didn't need to go to this party. But so I went and did my own degeneracy at the hotel. But we went and hung around the little party area before we went back to the hotel, and you could just tell, man, those chicks was blitzed, and they not traditional anime fans either. You're talking about chicks who just want to dress up like cartoon characters and have the titties out. I'm talking, it's wild at these conventions. If you could ever go to an anime convention in your area, like, kind of at night, bring some condoms and make sure you might, because you might have to walk away with gonorrhea. You know, I've never, you know, participated personally, because usually I don't go by myself in those things, and I make sure I keep mine with me. But, you know, sometimes those are some underserved chicks out there, and, you know, there's only so much Yu-Gi-Oh for you to play, and, you know, so many Pokemon cards for you to trade and all that kind of shit before they start acting out up there. Darren Miles' second question: thoughts on movies like the Joker movie and Fight Club? I think movies like Fight Club have had this sort of cult following. Like, I love Fight Club personally. The ethics of the movie is a little weird. The stories of the movie, I believe, is actually on point. Like, the story of Fight Club is that, you know, there's an entire generation of men raised by women. They lost their killer instinct, and they fight in order to fully find themselves, to reincorporate danger into their lives. And the Joker is a little bit different, because the Joker is a movie about a young man whose society is basically booted off to the margins. He's consistently bullied. He's, loveless. He's basically invisible to women. He's mistreated. He never fully achieves his dreams. He doesn't know who his father is. These are movies about men, and people are definitely bothered by that. Like, Fight Club scares people. I've literally seen people say that if you talk to a guy and his favorite movie is Fight Club, you need to run away. I'm like, no. If his favorite movie is Fight Club, you need to ask him why did he like Fight Club so much. I saw so many people were scared of the Joker movie. It's like, Joker is just like Taxi Driver. It's about lonely ass dudes who feel like the world doesn't care about them. They're overworked. They're basically invisible to women, and they want attention and love and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes these people can be pushed to the brink. Taxi Driver, that guy turns into a fucking hero, even though he was a psychopath. He ends up saving a little girl who was being trafficked. He ends up saving her. But in Joker, he goes nuts and he shoots a couple people. It is what it is. Fight Club, he creates a cult, a man cult. And I think Fight Club, the bad thing about Fight Club is it opened the door for the PUA community, of the red pill communities, the PUAs are my least favorite, because they all gym bros. Like, just go to the gym, bro. It's like, okay, that's not going to make you better with women. There's so many dudes who have muscles and are still cornballs, have no charisma and no personality. And, NBA players get cheated on. PUAs have nothing. They got nothing for that. He's in shape and he's rich. He still gets cheated on. Like, what does the PUA have to say about an NBA player? He's got nothing to help this guy. He's just fucked over. But that's really what those movies are about, is how men, society has treated them, and how far it can go if it goes unchecked and people are not paying attention. You may have yourself a beta male who falls under this Tyler Durden kind of thing, where this guy's leading him around into doing all kind of crazy shit. Or you may have yourself a Joker, and he's going to spaz out, and everything about his life he's going to blame on somebody else. His third question: do you think the Young Bucks are similar to London and Brian Kendrick? To a degree, yes. I think London and Kendrick being in WWE, their style was definitely tamped down a little bit. But around the same time, you had the Motor City Machine Guns, and I think that the Young Bucks probably borrowed a lot from them. Now, you want to watch matches that made no sense? Young Bucks or Generation Me versus the Motor City Machine Guns, those matches made no fucking sense at all. 4, why does Low Key have heat? Because Low Key is an asshole. There's a clip on Twitter of Low Key beating the shit out of a guy for botching a move. I'm talking beat the tar out of the fucking guy. It was in Ring of Honor. He beat the shit out of this fucking guy. He has a very high opinion of himself. Like, he started doing the Hitman gimmick, and I think New Japan told him they didn't want him dressing like that because it was too close to the Yakuza thing. They didn't want no part of that, and he did it anyway. And I think that's when he ended up getting him booted from New Japan. And now he's got heat for all his political opinions, for being anti-mask and being basically generally a freedom-thinking kind of guy. But he is an asshole. He also had a very, very high opinion of himself. Like, he hated his WWE run, which of course he did. He was treated like a fucking midget at the time, which is what he was. But Low Key just has heat for a lot of different reasons. He's a malcontent, just like Austin Aries. Number 5, how come politicians use entertainment as a scapegoat for mass shootings? Because they don't like to blame the shooter. Politicians like to blame either the tool or the culture for what happened. It just can't function to them that individuals are sometimes fucked up, especially when you're dealing with leftists, because leftists don't deal in the individual, they deal in the collective. Unless it's about, somewhat individual liberties as far as gay marriage and stuff like that. That's the only time they think about the individual. Other times they're talking about the culture and collectivism. They love to blame the culture for what the individual is doing. That's why they can't understand that crime is not a cultural issue. It is an individual issue. It's, people rob and steal because it's quicker to rob and steal than it is to go to work. And leftists will forever blame the culture for things that is not the fault of the culture. Usually these things already exist, and then the culture builds up around them, like gangsterism, like thug culture, like gangster rap. Like gangster rap exists because there were fucking gangsters that already existed. They just created a musical styling for themselves. That's really all it is. 6, how come people are having Twitter meltdowns over the abortion laws? Because of women. This is seen as a women's rights issue and not a bodily autonomy issue. If it was a bodily autonomy issue, they wouldn't have been supporting vaccine mandates. But again, this is another thing that leftists care more about. Women is a collective. And it's a collective, and the Democrats and the leftists love playing collective politics. And so they see that, abortion is an issue, and they see it as a women's issue, not a individual issue, which is probably what it should be. 7, AEW ever have a draft like WWE? Could ROH be AEW SmackDown? I'm thinking it's going to be more like AEW's NXT. Especially seeing how they treat it, it's definitely going to be more like the NXT. 8, the thoughts on the dating scene in today's society. It's the shits. It was bad. I had a long-term girlfriend, so it didn't really affect me too much. But when we broke up, it sucks because dating online, horrible. It is not a good idea. The women have too many options. I know that sucks to say, but when you look at a society where women see most men as being unattractive and not interesting enough because you're a boring guy who works in an office or something like that, if she has access to a guy 50 miles away, 150 miles away, 200 miles away in a different state or a different city, you basically become invisible. Most women are interested in a very small pocket of available men, and if those guys make a lot of money and they're available, they're basically diamond rocks to women, and that sucks. But it's hard to date women at the job or something like that because of all the sexual harassment laws. So if you're in college and you talk to a girl, if you ask her out more than once, sexual harassment. Sometimes you ask her out one time, you might get smacked with a sexual harassment suit and get booted out of school. So dating has become absolutely toxic, and it was an opportunism type of thing. There's this book called Heterophobia. I'm looking at it right now. It's on my bookshelf. It's called by Daphne Patai, and she talks about this. And it comes a lot from the second to third wave feminist idea of political lesbianism and a society of cutting up men, where you have these things where any interaction between men and women is a power game, and since women are considered the weaker sex, any type of pressure a man tries to put on her to go out on dates or anything is considered sexual harassment. So you have a lot of teenage boys who are not having sex because they're not just taught to respect women, but they're taught that sex is this bureaucratic thing, that it's not just you and her negotiate your sexual lives, but also you have to deal with what other people think about your sexual life. Do other people think that you're a creep because you called her at a certain time or you text her at a certain time? It's ridiculous. It's stupid. Dating in today's society is awful. And that's why so many people have no problem fighting each other. And that's why our birth rates and everything are so fucking low. And our marriage rates are so low. Because people are negotiating. People who do finally fuck, they're finally, they're just going out banging whoever. They're not trying to settle up and have any children and, have a house and build a life, like a middle class life. No, they're trying to be like, I'm successful in the dating scene. Let's keep the ball rolling. It's like gambling. You finally get a chick off Tinder or something like that. You're like, let's roll the dice again. Like I got the hot hand. The 9th question: how do you feel about Alex Jones? Alex Jones, he's fun to listen to. I think that he is up on things because he knows where to look for shit. Like Alex Jones has found stuff, that we don't find out about. He's found out about it 10 years ago because he looks in the oddest places and on the outskirts of the internet. But it also has a detrimental effect because he ends up in the far reaches of the conspiracy theory angles. But I, generally speaking, don't have a problem with Alex Jones and think that there are times where Alex Jones is absolutely right, and people need to pay more attention to him. Then there's other times where he's a loony bin, and I wish I just sit back and laugh at him. 10. How do you feel about Ember Moon's husband's King of the Black Woman t-shirt? I think she's a fool for marrying that fucking guy, and, her having accepting that shit is weird. I think personally, I'm not offended. I think it's funny, and maybe she thinks it's funny too. That's why she's okay with it. But I can tell how other people would be upset about it. The TOD is back. Who is Dave Meltzer really? Why do we care about his opinion? What is his rankings based off of? But most importantly, do you feel more confused listening to him than before he spoke? Yes, Dave Meltzer has a problem speaking. His strength is in writing. But Dave Meltzer became popular because of his dirt sheets. Even though he wasn't the first dirt sheet, he was a guy that, knew a lot. Again, he's a really good historian and a really good custodian for the business as far as knowing things, knowing people, meeting relationships, and this kind of stuff, making relationships. And so many wrestlers have vouched for him. A lot of them because they learned that if they talk to Meltzer, he'll give them good reviews. And if you get good reviews, you'll get more bookings and you'll get on the radar of some very important people. And that's where a lot of his power came from. A lot of his power came from his ability to network and build relationships with wrestlers. Not only to get stories out of them, but also for that quid pro quo of him having the ability to make you a star, to make you more valuable to promoters than you might have been before. And what is his rankings based off of, like his 5-star rating system? It's just his personal preference. And people are now more than ever know that. And I think that's probably why so many people are starting to turn against it. Music Fanatic has 9 questions. 1. What's your favorite alcoholic drink? Rum and Coke. I love rum and Coke. 2. Who's the better fighter? Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali? Muhammad Ali is a better fighter. Mike Tyson is probably a harder puncher, but Ali is no doubt a better fighter. And he probably fought better fighters too than Muhammad Ali. 3. Thoughts on Matt Cardona coming back to WWE one day and feuding with Cody? I just think they could tell an all-time great story about building their brands and coming back to WWE, taking 7 years to do it versus 2 or 3. I think that, especially since we found out that Matt Cardona wanted Cody to come back, something tells me that he also wants to come back. And I think he will coming back one day. And I think if Cody gets the right amount of political power, he will be able to bring Matt Cardona back in and they'll have a feud. Similar to Drew McIntyre and Jinder Mahal, even though that kind of, planked because WWE just will not put the gas behind Jinder. That's, I can see them pulling that kind of thing because, this guy also had 10 years in WWE. He knows how the system works. He's really increased his stock since he left. I think WWE will be interested in, bringing him back. They bring people back anyway. His 4th question. Ever thought of branching out into covering UFC or boxing? Not everything, but some of the bigger stories. Like right now, Tyson Fury's retirement, his match against Francis Ngannou, or your thoughts on celebrity boxing. Celebrity boxing is absolute garbage. And, I think it's an embarrassment to the sport, but there's nothing you could do because boxing it's regulated, but it's open to do shit like freak fights. I mean, it just is what it is. I don't follow boxing or UFC enough to talk about it on my channel, but I have covered like certain boxing and UFC related things. If something were to come up, I would. For instance, Ngannou wanting to box, it's just for the money. That's all. He just wants to get paid. That's all his problem. He sees boxing and he wants to get paid like those guys. And Dana White is not paying people like that. So he's willing to throw his chin onto the barbecue in order to, get that fight. And Tyson Fury is in the position that a lot of boxers get, where he's beaten the best guys, I guess you could say, in the division, and there's really nobody else for him to fight. So he's kind of like, I'm just going to quote unquote retire. He's not really retired. He's just basically sitting back waiting for somebody who he hasn't beaten already to break away from the pack, then he'll fight them, maybe, if we're lucky, because he doesn't have to. This is boxing. You know, boxing, you could dodge a guy for 10 fucking years like Floyd Mayweather did to Shane Mosley. You could dodge a guy fucking forever, you know, if you want to. But I don't think he's actually going to be retired. But I just think he, at this point, you know, is in a position where he doesn't have anything more to prove. 5. Have you ever seen Tombstone, the Wyatt Earp movie with Kurt Russell? Maybe give it a retro review if you can. I love Tombstone. I think Kurt Russell played, oh God, it's right on the tip of my tongue, but it's like, I'm Your Huckleberry. I've seen that movie. It's one of my ex-girlfriend's favorite movies. She used to love Tombstone. I haven't seen it in a long time either, so maybe I will watch it and give a review. 6. Thoughts on the mega stars AEW has created, like Wheeler Yuta, Hook, Dante Martin. WWE's 3-week push versus AEW stars. Do they have anyone on the roster that could cross over and get more eyes on the show? AEW does. I think Jade Cargill is their biggest opportunity to have a crossover star in the female division. I think Britt Baker's too much of a dork, and she also still has a day job, so I don't know if she'd even be able to do it. But I think she's proven that she's a mark more than anything, Britt Baker. I don't think Jade Cargill is a mark, but so I think that she has the best crossover appeal. As far as young guys are concerned, I don't see anybody in the AEW roster that has any crossover appeal as far as young guys are concerned. Maybe Ricky Starks, maybe, but that's pushing it. You know, you're pushing it very, very heavily on that. So I don't think so. But Wheeler Yuta sucks. Hook has potential, but they won't test him. They won't give him any challenges. They won't push him. They won't challenge him. They won't force him to sell or force him to cut promos or anything. They just found this nice little pocket of where they're going to keep him, and they're trying to keep him there, and that's not going to do him any good. Dante Martin, they actually have tested Dante Martin. They just don't want to give him a persona. He needs a persona. He needs a manager, a voice. You know, he needs something. You know, he's just so plain. He's just plain high flyer right now, and it sucks. 7. Do you think New Japan has a better relationship with Impact than AEW? Just looking at the talent they gave Impact Jay White, one of their best. Dude shows back up in New Japan and immediately challenges Okada for the belt. And AEW gets over the hill guys like Rocky Romero, Suzuki, and Ishii. They even started Tama Tonga's face turn on Impact show and not on a New Japan show. I think the relationship with Impact is probably better for them because Impact is a blank slate and they're willing to job their own talent out. AEW is not willing to do that. And I think when you're willing to job your own talent out, you know, that breeds trust. And Impact is more likely to be trustworthy than AEW. Again, AEW has done some shit on their show that was absolutely foul. Like switching the Impact title on an AEW show and not on an Impact show was cold-blooded. That was cold, all right? That was cold. And then dropping the title from one AEW guy to another. Cold-blooded. Not having Kenny Omega put over an Impact guy. Bullshit. You know, Impact is seemingly willing to do business. So, you know, New Japan's willing to help them a lot more. But I also think that due to the way Impact tapes, it's probably just better for the talent to go and tape I think you tape 2 or 3 weeks of Impact at a time, and then you can, you know, go back to Japan or go back to doing whatever you were doing, as opposed to, you know, being in wherever AEW is going to be for that week and then having to make it come back the next week. So it's probably just a little bit easier. 8 is about Kota Ibushi. I've already answered that. 9, a quote that stays with you. Could be from a book, a movie, a family, teacher, etc. I forget. I think it might have been Whoopi Goldberg's character, Celie, in the movie, who says something to the effect of, you know, the thing about people hating you is half the people don't know and the other half don't care. You know, or about hate. I think it's something like, you know, you hating people is half the people you hate don't know that you hate them and the other half don't care. And I think that's always been a perfect encapsulation that keeps me grounded when it comes to being very, very angry about things, whether it be politicians, wrestling, or anything. It's, more often than not, these people don't know. And then people who do know, because maybe I tweet at them, they don't care. All right. Thank you guys for listening. Like, share, and subscribe. And I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace out.